my name's Captain Drew Holland. I work for Space Launch Delta 45 in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Our mission is to launch rockets, and so I'm here at FinOps because we're running a landing zone in the cloud called Nebula and focused on FinOps, and really excited to be here. This is my first time at FinOps X, and to be honest, just getting surrounded by that community of practice and folks that are in the same landscape and the same challenges that we're facing on the government side. It's always interesting because from our side on the DoD, we have so many regulations and we can call them hurdles or barriers to jump through with the quote unquote red tape. It's cool to see how industry has already solved these problems, and then we get to come in and capitalize and see, hey, how can I take these little bits and pieces from whether it be Dell Tech or, how's Google Cloud doing something? How's AWS releasing something new, and getting to meet with these folks and, really tie this stuff back into our mission. Yeah. So for me, the future of FinOps, from the DoD lens means shifting the way that we do business and the way that we think about financial operations in the cloud. When you look at industry, industry is really kind of setting the pace for cloud migration, adoption, acquisition. In the DoD, we're making a lot of good leaps and bounds and strides to get there. The Nebula Landing Zone, which is what the program that I'm the PM for, was stood up because in the NDAA language, Congress charged us to start looking at how we build direct and indirect charges to the commercial entities, what we call launch service providers like SpaceX, Blue Origin, ULA, Relativity. And so, we needed to have a better grasp of what is the charges that the taxpayer is currently incurring that should be put into a chargeback pipeline, so that those costs no longer fall on the taxpayer, but are now the cost of doing business for the launch service providers. So we stood up a landing zone called Nebula. Nebula actually means space cloud, so we got a little bit cheeky with the name. And so Nebula is really kind of flipping DoD cloud processes on its head. We need to get down to where we can track by mission workload down to the specific per launch level of granularity, so that when we go and we partner with our commercial entities, that they have confidence in what we're putting back into that chargeback pipeline is accurate, it's timely, and they're comfortable with what we're putting into the invoices. And so we as a government organization have a responsibility on the reins to ensure safety, to ensure mission assurance that what we put on the front end of the rocket's going to fly. And so some of those roles in space launch are inherently governmental. And no matter who the launch service provider is, we have a mission that we have to make sure that we're protecting the general public and our DoD mission. And so we're really looking at how do we take those mission sets that we're responsible for and get them into an IT infrastructure footprint in the cloud, to where we can, see that cloud spend per launch and alleviate that burden on the taxpayer. And eventually, my dream for this program would be to run the DoD's first $0 cloud program. It may be a bit of a pipe dream, but getting here and chatting with the folks and how we do FinOps across the commercial side is really putting us in a really good spot moving forward. Being here, seeing what the FinOps Foundation is doing with systems like Focus, and seeing how that's been adopted across the cloud service providers, it is amazing. Just the automation, the granularity, the visibility, and the automation of that data being readily accessible for not only program managers like me who have to run the landing zone, but for us to be able to funnel that up to senior leadership, especially in the DoD, where we may not be as familiar with cloud as the private sector. It's been really interesting while we've been here to see how there's even avenues to get on-premise spend and to track some of the stuff that we haven't been able to track previously. If we can leverage the lessons learned from the folks here on the private side, it'll put us in a really good position. Tracking software licensing and SaaS applications and some of those third-party tooling offerings that we need to put into our landing zone. Being able to spread that across our mission set and kind of amortize that bill across the entirety of the space launch portfolio will be huge going forward. For us on the DoD side, Cybersecurity is at the forefront of what we do. A huge portion of the workload that we do on the Nebula landing zone is focused on cybersecurity, to make sure that we're not putting the mission at risk. To be able to take the FinOps principles and understand the entirety of that workflow, uh, and not just from the compute and store perspective, but then taking into, who's doing your identity access management, who's doing your software licensing, what are those costs, and what are those timelines associated with it, and then how do we get that into not just a financial pipeline but a value pipeline, to where we can use FinOps principles to spread that cost um, across the entirety of Space Launch's cloud portfolio. Um, I think it'll be invaluable. And what it's going to do is, it's going to free up budget for mission owners. When you look at what we're doing for Nebula, it's not the Nebula program that's funding these applications. It's the safety office, it's the mission assurance office, it's the spaceport integration office, who are having to run these legacy bespoke systems that we're going to take to the cloud, and leveraging these principles burn down their cost. The government, the key to government acquisitions is too much capability and not enough money or enough time. And so, by going to the cloud, we've really got an opportunity here to, one, bring value at a cheaper rate, and then two, let these folks focus on the things that matter versus just the running their own closed private network. Like, let's free up the budget for them to spend the things on efforts that really matter, and move launch forward.